Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ. On this episode, our guest is none other than Hemmings' own Terry McGean. Terry, how are you, sir?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And today's topic, classic SUVs. Now, by classic, I'm going to go everything that's, say, 20 years or older, because when you talk about that, 20 years is pretty much a classic at this point, right?
Yeah.
And they're still relatively modern enough that you could drive them every day and use them every day and go off-road. And plus, in that world of classic SUVs, the values have gone a little bit on the crazy side. So yeah, that's today's topic. And I think it's relevant. As I know Terry's got experiences with classic SUVs. I personally own 3 of them that drive me bananas on a daily basis. Yeah, that's what we got. So we're looking forward to hearing your comments. So where should we start, Terry? Should we start in the collectible? Should we start in the reliable? Should we start in the maintenance department? Where do you want to start?
Well, I'm going to comment first on, you just said, like, are these things classic when they're 20 years old? So I think that some of these SUVs became classics almost early, right? Because, like, for example, your Bronco.
Sure.
What year is your Bronco? 96? Is it the last one?
Yeah, last year of the OBS. Yep.
So if you think about it, like, okay, 96, we don't think of that as really being classic, but when they stopped making those, that was kind of the end of that type of vehicle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, somewhere right around there, Chevy stopped doing two-door, what had become the Tahoe, which had formerly been the Blazer. So it was sort of a genre vehicle that just went away, and it kind of made them seem classic early, right?
Yeah.
And then kind of a funny thing happens where years go by, and I mean, nobody cared about those Broncos for a long time. And I remember seeing them for sale, and F-150s of the same vintage would be worth a lot more money.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, these Broncos are a great deal. And then, like, a light switch happened. Fortunately, you got yours before it happened, I think.
Yep.
And like a lot of these things, are just going up. So I guess there's my little prelude into your question was, what are they, reliable? Are they good? I mean, they're good old-fashioned trucks. So, I mean, yeah, generally they're pretty reliable and durable and easy to work on. And parts are still mostly easy to get until you get into some of the older trim stuff, but mechanical stuff pretty readily available at the Napa at the corner. I mean, their biggest is just like kind of with the cars of the 60s and 70s, their biggest nemesis is rust, right? Back here on the East Coast, especially.
Right.
But you were driving yours as a daily for a while before gas went nuts, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, to your point, they've actually been very reliable. My 96 Bronco, I literally bought that, and that was my daily driver. And, it is a truck, make no mistake, right? Today's SUVs are basically unibody structure. They're really not trucks, so to speak. Classic SUVs were really trucks. They were body on frame, big V8, solid live axles or trailing arm suspension, right? But they are really easy to work on. That being said, like, my Bronco has a 351 in it. It gets 12 miles to the gallon, and it has a 33-gallon tank.
Yeah.
So that gets expensive. I also have that 90 Grand Wagoneer, which is really, I mean, that went unchanged from basically 1963 until they stopped making it in 1991. Yeah. And it really is basically a tractor. But to your point, anything that breaks on these is fixable. It's usable. And it's funny. I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine. Yesterday. And we were talking about new cars, right? We were talking about how a new SUV, and it doesn't matter if it's American, if it's from overseas, you're talking to get anything decent is 40 grand plus, $40,000 plus, right?
Yeah.
And you can't work on it. You can, but not really, because of the electronics, because of things like that. And it was very interesting. I mean, literally right before this podcast, and folks, I told this to Terry before the show. We have an old, aside from the Bronco on our old Grand Wagoneer, we also have an old 20-year-old Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's the WJ model with the 4-liter inline 6. And I bought it in the beginning of COVID. Now, that body style doesn't seem that old, but the fact of the matter is it came out in 1999. So it's 23 years old, right? a window regulator broke. And hit the switch, the window just caves down into the track. You go, oh shit, now I gotta fix this. But here's the thing. Went on to online. About 6 months ago, my passenger side regulator broke. I was like, let me just order a driver's side at the same time, which I did. So I had it on the shelf. Fixed it this morning in about an hour and 15 minutes. And all of a sudden it's back on the road again. And I don't know how easy that is with a newer SUV.
Well, I think everything is getting, with every vehicle as time goes on, it seems to get a little harder and a little harder. You were talking about being able to work on these things, and I was pretty excited about the new Bronco coming out. I'm still kind of excited about it.
Sure.
I'm more of a muscle car guy than a 4x4 guy, but I've always liked 4x4s. And I like that you could have this thing and drive it every day and have it as a fun vehicle.
Yeah.
I've got 2 kids. I could put the kids in there. We could actually use this as a quasi SUV. But both the engines that thing comes with, even I work on cars and I open the hood and I'm just like, oh man, you got a turbo 4-cylinder or a twin turbo V6. And of course Ford on those made no attempt to cover them up or make them look pretty, which I kind of appreciate. But you look in there and it's like, oh man. And, like everything, I find it, we've seen this throughout over the years, right? You and I have been doing this. I mean, I remember when fuel injection hit 5-liter Mustangs and everybody was like, oh, that's it. You can't work on your car anymore. And of course we got over that.
Right.
And we'll get over this too. But yeah, everything gets harder to do as time goes on, harder to work on, harder to understand. But at the same time, I do appreciate that the aftermarket is so excited about the new Bronco and some other cars, the new Jeep. Of course, the Jeep has been popular forever. And they make stuff and they do their best to make it easy for you to do the things, change suspension stuff, change axle stuff, maybe boost the engine. So thankfully the aftermarket is kind of on it to help those things happen.
What do you think about the values? Because, you touched on this a little bit earlier, right? Well, like when between my cell phone, between my Jeep Grand Cherokee, my Jeep Grand Wagoneer, in my Bronco, I have 3 vehicles that I'm literally into for under $20,000, right? I got them right before I seemingly hit them right before they went bananas. But when you look at what I paid for them, right? I paid 10 grand for my old Bronco. I paid 10 grand for my Wagoneer. I put some work into them, whatever. Then I paid 5 for my Jeep, right? So 25 grand for 3 vehicles. The Bronco now, 20,000 plus. Right?
Yeah.
The Wagoneer, easily 35, 40,000 with the work and restoration that I've done. I tell people all the time, the values, it is not like for the Bronco, for instance, it is not a $20,000+ driving experience. The Wagoneer is absolutely not a $30,000 driving experience, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're looking at those things as nostalgic, which is great. But I can't get over what people are paying for these things.
Yeah, I think the trend got hot and a whole bunch of people jumped in who would not normally have these vehicles. Yeah. And it's driven the values up. And it's nice if you own one and you want to cash out of it, but it's not so nice if you wanted to get one. Yeah. I mean, you look at the core vehicles like the early Bronco, and those have been valuable for a long time. They've had value among enthusiasts for quite a long time, but now they're kind of getting out of sight. Early Blazers, we've seen that happen pretty quickly. I mean, we're working on a 76 Hemmings, and just in the few years since we acquired that thing, the value on it has shot up, which in that case is nice because it's sort of justified the project. The earlier Blazers, the Gen 1 Blazers, you can't touch those things now. I mean, nope. That generation of Chevy truck was always popular. Blazers of that vintage were never super common, and they rusted real easily. So a lot of them have been gone for a long time. Right. Now you see rusty junk, and it's, you got to pay $5 grand for something that's really rusty that needs a complete restoration before you can use it. I'm kind of, I don't know. I say that I'm hoping that it'll level out and sort of correct and the values will slip back down a bit. And I do think that'll happen. It tends, it happens with a lot of things that get real hot. And I sort of hope it does. I mean, the whole thing with trucks lately that is a little confounding is, remember, like, trucks were a way to get into old vehicles cheaply, right?
That's right.
Like, if you wanted a 69 Charger or 69 Camaro and you're like, I can't afford one of those. Hey, but I can get a 69 Chevy pickup and I can afford that and I can work on that, or whatever kind of truck. And now, I mean, in some cases, the trucks are more valuable than the same year muscle cars, depending on what it is.
That's right. Do you think there's a case with SUVs now? I mean, say like a Kia Telluride, for instance, right? New SUV, midsize, 45 to 50 grand.
Yeah.
Right. $45,000 to $50,000. If you go and granted, definitely more reliable, creature comforts, the whole thing. Do you think there's a case for the consumer to say, well, gas mileage aside, you know what? I'm going to go back and I'm going to buy an old Bronco, or say a Tahoe or something like that that's 20 years old, because while it's $25,000, it's still seemingly half the price of a new car. And granted, like, if you go, you and I both, I'm sure we both know people with Broncos and Tahoes and things like that have 200,000 miles on these things, right? Yep. These trucks, they run. They will go a couple 100,000 miles without really blinking with basic maintenance to these things. You think the business case is there? And if so, do you think it's a smart one? Like, would you ever recommend to somebody to say, why don't you look at this for 20 as opposed to spending 50 on that?
I think it depends who the person is for number one, because, people like you and I, and a lot of the people who would be seeing this, we're enthusiasts. We can do at least some of our own work.
Yeah.
And we're tolerant of things maybe not working perfectly all the time. It maybe doesn't make us happy, but we'll put up with it. Whereas I think the average consumer these days expects a car to never break. If you don't really know cars, I might not recommend that. And things are a lot different where I am, because where you are, you could buy an old Tahoe, and if the thing is mechanically sound, just keep driving and driving and driving. And every once in a while, something goes wrong, you take it to the garage and get it fixed.
Yeah.
That's not a bad plan. Back here, unfortunately, those 20 or so year old Chevy and Ford trucks and Dodge trucks, they're really rusty. And even if they don't look rusty on the outside, everything underneath is fused together. And you could go buy one from another part of the country and bring it back here. You kind of need to take care of it, and you could do that. I mean, I guess I'm talking in circles a little bit because I'm pondering your question as I'm talking, but that's the kind of thing that I would like to do. It's the way I think. Like, I don't want to spend 45 grand when I could spend 20 and have something that's a little different and kind of cool. But then when I think about like what my wife drives, so my wife has a Highlander,
right?
And I just like her to have, here,
you
have
new,
a good car,
runs forever,
right? But again, like, we bought our Highlander new in 2016. It's been awesome. I just heard that Toyota is going to change from a V6 to a turbo 4-cylinder next year. I don't really want that. I want the V6.
Yeah.
I like things that just big, dumb, works all the time.
Under stressed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, her car just turned 100,000 miles. Maybe I should grab one of the last 22s.
Yeah.
And the price on it is like, it's $5,000 more than it was in 2016 for the base.
Right.
And they came out with like an extra sort of base, and that's like $8,000 more than what we paid for ours. And there's no haggling now. You're lucky if they'll sell it to you for MSRP.
Right.
So I guess to get back to your point again, it's a lot of money. Now a base Highlander is getting up to $40,000. That's a lot of money for
it's a lot. That's a lot. Car. Well, I think it's a lot of money for everybody as well. I mean, and that's, it's interesting because that's what I always look at, right? I haven't bought anything brand new since 2013. And, I have not had a car payment now for almost 10 years. I love not having a car payment. And when you talk about a $40,000 car, that's a $600-700 a month car payment, depending on how many years you finance it for, unless you go in with 40 grand and just drop it down, which most people don't do, right? Whereby I look at my '02 Grand Cherokee, that in the beginning of COVID, I paid $5 grand for it with, I don't know, I think it had 118,000 miles. I've got 140 on it now.
Yeah.
And it needed a little maintenance here and there, like the window regulator, right? So each one $60 a piece, fine, $120, couple hours of my time to fix it. Not a big deal. But I'm stretching that $5 grand now for quite some time, because that's what I paid for the thing. And if I can stretch that to 200,000 miles or another, say, 3 to 5 years or whatever it is, that's pretty good.
No, that's really good. And I think that way too for myself. Even here, my own cars that I drive every day tend to be cheap and stuff. I probably should have better cars, but it really is nice not paying a car payment. That Highlander I mentioned that we have, it's paid off. And I like the idea that it would be nice to not have a car payment for a while. And you're right too. I mean, you buy, 10, 15, 20 grand, whatever we're talking about, for a used older truck. And so if every once in a while you got to put $500 in it, you're still way ahead of whatever the car payment is on your $45,000 new vehicle. I mean, for any of us who have a little bit of tolerance for older stuff and can at least turn a wrench once in a while, and really, even if you have a good garage that doesn't rake you over the coals, you could stay clean and make this plan. And for people living in cities, this was probably something that appealed to you too. One of the nice things about the older SUVs is they are trucks, and you can bash them around, and they don't care. They're made for it. Whereas more modern vehicles, certainly smaller vehicles, potholes and then other things you run into in regular driving. I mean, our cohort, Dan Stoner, living in San Francisco with you, every time I talk to him, either his 300 SRT8 or his Mini Cooper has had some sort of mishap with a pothole or a curb or something. And this used to be able to do this with like Chevy Caprices and Crown Vics, but now the last of the cars that were sort of truck-like are really getting old. So you got to look at trucks, real trucks.
Yeah, and that's just it. It's it's interesting. I think for anybody out there that's interested in buying an older truck, right? You have to think of it like this. Most trucks you can get parts for, older trucks, and I'll say 20 years. So like my 2002 Grand Cherokee, I could still get almost every part for that thing online, right? I could still get headlights, I can get taillights, I could get door panels, window regulators, all of that stuff, right? For my 96 Bronco, which is a bit older, you got to work a little bit, because you got to remember, from the cab forward, it's an F-150, and they made 9 billion of those things.
Yeah.
But, and same headlights, same taillights, but you know what? Things like interior door panels, dash pads, things like that, at 25 years old, things start to get brittle. Plastics start to get brittle. My Wagoneer, that thing is like my Grand Wagoneer at, 30 plus years old. That is really difficult to get parts for. Now, the mechanical stuff, like for the engine and stuff like that, that's not an issue. But try to find a set of power window switches if those go out.
Yeah. Well, your Wagoneer is kind of an orphan, because it really was an AMC.
Right.
And even though they kept building them after Chrysler took over, Chrysler just kept that thing the same. In fact, I was astounded years ago when I learned, I think I assumed for a long time that the last Grand Wagoneers had Chrysler 360 engines. And I found, no, they're AMC 360 engines. Like they kept casting AMC 360 engines just for those trucks.
That's right.
But yeah, all the interior bits, things like you're saying, electrical stuff, switches, it's all AMC stuff that was old design when that was a vehicle. Yeah.
It was old in the 70s, and they kept that crap going until 1990. So now in 2022, it's weird, because I don't think of these old cars as that old. Like when I think of I think of 1990. I don't think of it as 32 years ago. Like 1990 to me, I'm like, wow, it's like 10 years ago. It wasn't. It wasn't.
I just realized the other day that my 96 Impala SS is more than 25 years old. And I kind of
Crazy.
sent a chill up my spine. I was like, how is that possible? But yeah, but at least with a Ford Bronco, and being so closely related to the F-150, there were lots of parts out there. And now you're probably getting to the end of the chasm between when the OEs stop making spare parts and the aftermarket starts.
Hey, that's what a fabulous point. That is such a good point, Terry, because I feel like it is that 20-year, maybe 22 to 23-year period that if, when vehicles kind of go out of production, they languish, you can't get parts anymore. And then all of a sudden they catch on again and the aftermarket's like, ooh, maybe we should make stuff for this.
And I think we're getting, I'm going to say, smarter about looking to our old vehicles. In other words, I think most vehicles have gone through the phase where they're new, then they're kind of late model, then they're a little older, and then they get to the point where it's like, well, that's just old. Nobody cares about that. It's junk. And then a little more time goes by and it's like, oh no, those are cool. And now the cycle has repeated enough times that I think the smarter part is, I think we're all beginning to realize if it was ever interesting, it's going to be interesting again. So
correct.
You don't need to tell me that they made, a billion bullnose F-150s. It doesn't matter. It's an old Ford pickup truck. And at some point, somebody is going to decide they want to fix it up. So, so it's happening again. And so, and now even the last Aero nose of that generation, right? The OBS. Just really in the past few years, I think the aftermarket's like, yeah, these are cool. And if you think about it, that was an old design, right? That was like 1980 to 96 in terms of the platform. And so again, in 96, that was like, that thing was old when it was new. And, my buddy had a 93 Lightning when it was brand new. And that was a really cool truck. But we knew then, it's like, man, they're really stretching out the investment, the amortization on this tooling. And then the new truck that replaced it was not just a restyle. It was a completely new truck, a lot of new philosophy. So again, those trucks that ended in 96 had a lot more lineage to old Ford pickup trucks, even prior to 1980, than the stuff that's happened since.
Do you think with like the new Broncos, right? Like, so if you go out and you buy a new Bronco now, right? You buy a Badland, whatever the models are, right? Whatever the thing is, with the electronics, right? With the, navigation screens and everything else. And now that everything is so tied into your touchscreen system, in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you think they're still going to be around? Do you think you think those motors are going to be there? Do you think the technology is going to be, do you think it's going to be worth it? Or do you think they're throwaways? Because I feel like in 25 years, my OBS Bronco could still be running.
Yeah. I like to think, we've talked about this with some of the muscle cars too, but I'd like to think that this stuff, enthusiasts will kind of figure it out, right? We've done it before. It's going on right now. Again, if you look kind of at like 5-liter Mustangs, TPI Camaros,
Right.
the electronics, certainly nothing like what new cars have, but they're getting older. What do? Well, people are starting to open up old PCMs and fix stuff, control modules for power windows and power locks and other stuff. There are some guy in Indiana somewhere is cutting these things open in his basement. It's true, the stuff they're making now, they rely so heavily on touch screens and everything. It does make you wonder, what are we going to do with this? Time will tell, and I think it will depend on how much we fall in love with these things now, because that's what's that is what will fuel us to keep them alive later. If the trend continues where like people are really loving the new Bronco, people have loved Jeeps all along. They love the brand new Jeeps seemingly at least as much as they loved, I think people like new Jeeps better than they like the square headlight ones when those were new,
Sure.
So and then the other thing that will play a role is the future is pretty unclear right now. They're trying to tell us that everything's going to be electric. I don't know if that's true. Really don't know how I feel about that. What if everything's electric in 20 years and these things are collectible because, man, it's so cool to have an ice truck,
Right, right.
Or what if it's, yeah, you can't get gasoline anymore. You have to buy it like we buy race fuel now, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to buy 5 gallon. I don't know. I'm certainly hoping that doesn't happen, but I feel like this is a really interesting time right now. It's a really great time. I wish I had more money so I could buy more
Right.
stuff. Um, which is kind of a segue into, I was just mentioning you before we started this. Dodge just had made a whole bunch of announcements about cool stuff that they're doing. And
Yeah.
one of the things that's bittersweet is, Charger and Challenger are going away.
Going away.
They're going to go out with a real bang. I've wanted one of those cars for a long time. I'm not really in a period in life where it's easy for me to justify buying one, but after watching that presentation, I'm like, what can I sell to maybe buy
Yeah.
one of these, And one of the things that came out of that, of course, talking about the Durango and how they're putting the Hellcat back in it. So there's an SUV that, I mean, I've driven that thing. You've just took a
Yeah.
road trip in one. It's insane. It's insane in how fast it is with the traction and the power.
Yeah.
And it's insane in how nice it is to live with every day or cross country. I can't believe that I can't believe that people are going to forget about that, right?
I don't think so, Tara.
So
I just they're too, I think, we got a little out on tangents, but who cares? I mean, the fact of the matter is that there's stuff that's really cool out there. And I think, like you said, from a daily driver standpoint, there's no question that the new stuff is good. Like that Durango Hellcat that Hemmings just bought, it is every day, no problem, daily driver. Take it to the shops, take it on a road trip, it doesn't matter. It'll always start, it'll always run, and always be great. Can you do that in a 96 Bronco? Can you do that in a 91 Ram Charger or a Tahoe or something like that? You can, but what you find is time has moved on. Speeds have moved on. It's not like everybody's cruising at 65 anymore or 7 or even 70. Everybody now, especially out here, if you're going on the interstates, is rolling at 85 miles an hour. That's not uncommon. I'm going to tell you all straight up, a 96 Bronco is not rolling at 86 or 85 miles an hour. It's a 70 mile an hour truck. That's it. You want more than that, ain't happening. A Wagoneer is a 60 mile an hour truck.
Yeah.
Okay. A Hellcat Durango, that'll cruise all day at 140 and not even blink. And it does it beautifully. And it's efficient. And it's fun. And it's powerful. So there are trade-offs, right? You have the nostalgia, the ease of use, and the I can work on stuff myself factor, and the price, obviously.
Yeah.
Versus the, oh my God, the performance is ridiculous. This will probably go for 150,000 miles, right? But I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to pay 50, 60, 100 grand for one of these trucks. I'm very, very curious where everybody falls on this. So for everybody out there who's listening, and I'm really serious, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think it's worth it to go out and spend that 50, 60 grand on a new SUV? Or do you think it's worth it to go out and spend, let's say, 15 to 30 on an old SUV that you can work on and, might not be the best performance, but you're going to get at least another 10 years out of it, 12 years out of it, whatever the case is. So let me know your thoughts. And especially you younger people out there, like if you're in your 20s and your 30s, let me know. I'm so curious to hear what your thoughts are about that. Because I go through it all the time, man. Like part of me is just, I'm cheap and I don't want to go out and spend $50,000 because I can put that somewhere else that makes a hell of a lot more sense than a car. But then I drive the new stuff and I'm like, wow, this is really nice. So I don't know, Tara.
I don't either. I think we'll have to see what's coming next, but I think like you, I'm cheap too, and I like older stuff, and I don't like car payments. But at the same, and then there's stuff that's new that I just like and want, and that then makes me want to buy it. So I don't know. Old trucks, I think, are going to be around for a long time. I think interest in them is higher than it's been ever, maybe.
Yep.
And 4x4s in particular. So if you're thinking about buying one, and you can get a decent deal on one, you're probably not going to go wrong right now, and have some fun and see where this whole thing leads.
Couldn't agree with you more. So everybody, we're going to close on that note. Obviously, if you do want an old school SUV or anything for that matter, we have the Hemmings Classifieds, which is about 25,000 cars anywhere with anything that you want, largest classified section online, as well as our auction. So obviously check that out at Hemmings.com. Otherwise, Tara, always great to just bullshit about old stuff.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So very, very cool. Absolutely. And everybody, like I said, please leave your comments. Hit us with questions. Again, this is a topic I'm really curious about. So let us know what you think, and we'll see you next time on the Hot Rod BBQ Podcast. Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod BBQ Podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod BBQ Podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.